Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content, but since this is one of our special edition short episodes, we don't have time to record one of our comedic adult content warning masterpieces. I mean, we could have, in about the same amount of time it took to tell you we wouldn't, but we didn't. So there. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Ray Barboni from Miami.
Tough shit, bro. This ain't Miami. You want something? You gotta talk to me.
No. Fuck you, fuckball.
My name is Harris K. Telemacher. I live in Los Angeles, and I've had 7 heart attacks. All imagined.
Yeah, Jake, it's Chinatown.
The stars at night are big and bright.
Deep in the heart of Texas.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the New Way podcast where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. These shorter, more bite-sized episodes will feature spotlights on locations, actors, actresses, directors, writers, and more. Less preamble, more amble. Of course, we are also still in the midst of the coronavirus social distancing, so I'm operating solo out of the Last Pint Production studio with Ben
You're
Wilson.
always operating solo,
I
Matt.
like to operate solo, but I am joined
If you were in Georgia, you could have been having this podcast right out in the open.
I've been joined uninterruptedly by Ben Wilson and Nick Santacroce.
As of Friday, Nick.
How you guys doing?
I'm doing okay.
All right, that's all we have time for that. It's
I'm
happy to
gonna
be.
need
Don't defend Georgia.
We're gonna race right through it because who knows when this airs? Georgia might not even exist anymor. So
I highly doubt that's going to be the case.
Well, we don't know. We'll see. But just UGA. This special edition New Way podcast is focusing on a location near and dear to one of our own. And it is the location. It is not Georgia. It is not Georgia. It is Maryland in the United States of America. And Nick is wearing his Old Bay seasoning outfit. It looks like he's a race car driver sponsored by Old Bay.
It is a cycling jersey, so you're not far off.
There we go. Cycling. There we go.
I thought it was festive. It's the classic seasoning of the whole state of Maryland.
Well, we've been torturing Nick on several of our deep dive episodes by focusing on topics that he's maybe not quite as intimately familiar with. But tonight, the tables are turned as Nick is from the lovely state of Maryland and grew up there and probably has a lot of special, I think, insight on this location as a shooting location and as a film location thematically.
And it's not a huge destination for either of those things, to tell you the truth. But growing up in Maryland, you are raised on, crabs on the deck, Baltimore Orioles, and you eventually find out about John Waters.
John Waters. I was about to say, that's where you got to start.
Well, I wouldn't say. Well, you're not raised with John Waters. The subject material is a bit too feisty.
So you're saying I shouldn't have seen Serial Mom at the age of 8?
Well, as long as you didn't see Pink Flamingos in elementary school, I think you probably could have handled it. You were very precocious.
And I think we'll work into the water stuff because it is interesting, right? There are cities like
dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, there's in
the water, hon.
Water
dip
down
your
ocean.
John Waters, hon.
It's interesting because there are cities like Chicago or Atlanta or a number of Canadian places that are stand-ins for other locations because they get tax credits, right? And we'll probably get to a lot of those locations. Versus Maryland does not have that. And it's not a lot of times also even integral to the story when things are set in Maryland because it's usually, we talked about Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and a lot of those.
Exactly, Matt. Yeah. If a movie has an important scene in D.C., a lot of times the main action will take place in Maryland because it was a quick jaunt up the road.
Well, you think about it, most people who work in DC, they either commute for Virginia or they commute from Maryland. They live in Rockville or other places, where it's like, or closer to Arlington or.
Look at this guy dropping Rockville.
I know. I've done work in Rockville, Maryland before.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and on screen, it's typically two places are most often gone to, and that's Baltimore for good reason, and Annapolis, just because anytime it's going to like the naval base, the U.S. naval base, that's in like a ton of movies are going to Annapolis.
Wow.
Matt, just funny that you just cut out there for a good 25 seconds.
Now I know what it feels like. I get it.
Well, you don't know what it's like.
So what's really fun is now that I am doing video of these, that's where the podcast becomes almost unable to edit together because my sound has been recording everything versus the video at some point is just going to go through a massive hiccup, and I'm going to figure that out. So we'll see how that goes. But I was saying, yeah, the
if you're watching this and not listening, just know the pains.
Something happened. It took me a long time. Yeah, I was saying the two main areas that you usually are seeing in film or TV are Baltimore, and then Annapolis is often done. It shows up in movies partially because the Naval Academy is there, and that seems to be in a large amount of movies, oddly enough.
Namely, there was this one movie that took place in Annapolis. I forgot what it was called.
There we go.
Oh yeah, Annapolis.
There we go. We knew that was coming. I didn't know which one would make it, but what's also
it wasn't going to be Adventure in Baltimore, which looks delightful. I've never seen it though, just on Wikipedia.
Well, what's kind of cool is that I think Maryland as a state is a very ripe for a lot of things, and there are two I think main directors that are heavily involved with Baltimore. John Waters is one, and Barry Levinson is the other. And it really is. There's you have that political intrigue because of the close proximity to Washington D.C., but then you also have this racial warfare background and integration and segregation and gentrification that really colors a lot of movies that are set in there. And then there's just some movies that I going through this and prepping, I had no idea were set or filmed in Maryland. They just happen to be, and it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Well, the thing is, if it's not having to do with intimately with Baltimore related issues, which is really just The Wire or Homicide for the most part, or doesn't have anything to do with DC, no one goes to Maryland except for Barry.
Yeah,
to just do a Maryland film. There always has to be a reason. There has to be a pretext. There has to be something political or, really focusing on something specific. And that just doesn't happen a whole lot. And that's why when I was thinking about Maryland films, what made an impression on me as a native, what got me excited? Because it wasn't necessarily the Sum of All Fears when Raven Stadium gets blown up, gets the Batman treatment. It's when it surprised me, when I got into a movie and didn't know. Like, for example, he's just not that into you. Maryland, it's like that old cliche. Maryland is a character in the film as well, but it really is. They're living on Brewers Hill. You see the Natty Boh Man and a set piece.
No kidding.
Our local beer, and everything that they do really showcases just a normal Baltimore movie. It just happens to be where it takes place. There's very few of those films.
That's interesting. I've never seen that one, so I wasn't sure how in depth it was. It took place in Maryland.
I don't think they even say it once. If you know it, you know the landmarks. You know where they are. They didn't make a big deal about it.
Yeah, I don't. And I don't mean this as like a disparaging remark. It's actually just kind of funny. Is that one of the things I noticed? Like when I first, because I didn't know anybody from Maryland or from Baltimore until I met Nick, but I noticed that there was this like almost in other places there was this like starved camaraderie, because I think it wasn't one of those places that you automatically like associate with a certain culture or whatever. It's not like a DC or whatever. You'd see somebody with a Maryland license plate and the Maryland flag, crab or something on the back of a car, and people like, you'd be on the interstate and people would roll down their window. They'd be like, "Where are you from?" And you'd be like, "Towson." And I mean, this happened multiple times.
It is a rabid fan base. It is surprisingly rabid fan base.
But it's like it's so cool because they're fans of the state culture, and
it's really
a pride thing, right?
Well, yes, but it's a self-deprecating pride thing. It's very specific. Like we have a beer called National Bohemian that is no longer brewed in Baltimore. We call it Natty Boh.
Natty
Boh for short. And it's not made in Maryland anymore. It's not even owned by the same people. It's a terrible beer. It's a step down from Pabst Blue Ribbon, if you can imagine. Okay?
Yes, it is.
But it's got
hey! Don't knock the PBR now.
It's totally fine if you're at a punk show somewhere and already 4 beers in. But the thing about Maryland, we latch on to the things that maybe we shouldn't be proud of, and we own it. And that's really, to me, if a film captures that part of the people, they've got a large part of it right, in my book. You see that Natty Bo man, the cartoon looks like the bastard son of the Pringles man, like a poor man's Pringles.
He only has one eye, right?
Yeah, he's winking technically, but it didn't draw the closed eyelid, so he looks like a cyclops. It's very weird. In Baltimore and Maryland, it's very weird. Before Austin printed it on their bumper stickers, I'll have you know, we were embracing the weird. And a lot of that really you have to attribute to John Waters, almost exclusively.
I have a Natty Bo ornament on my tree.
Yes, yes, you do.
What's the name of the chip? There's like a chip that, I mean, they sponsor like the Orioles, and they're like...
it's technically a Pennsylvania brand.
Right.
But they paired with Old Bay. Or no, they didn't. They didn't. Another potato chip formerly paired with Old Bay to compete with Utz crab chips.
That's what it is.
But yes,
I was wondering. One of the things I read up on that cracked me up, and I was wondering. Like, I don't think obviously you were a kid, so I don't know if it would have been big news, but I can't imagine this would have gone over well. So they shot portions of Major League 2 in Maryland at Camden Yards
because Jacobs Field was being built at the time,
and so they rebranded it as like "Welcome to Cleveland Stadium," and I can't imagine that being like a popular thing to have and be like, hey, everyone come on down and cheer for this fake Indians team as we've like rebranded your Orioles stadium. That must have been a weird shoot, I've got to imagine.
It would have been worse if it happened after they stole the football team from Cleveland. I'll say that much.
Yeah, that was my point.
They also did a similar thing for the Keanu Reeves classic, The Replacements. And they filmed the football, and it's funny because their colors weren't purple. All the seats were, so they had to fill those seats. Otherwise, you knew something was up. Keanu's played a quarterback in that film that was loosely based on the NFL strike.
I love that movie.
Oh yeah,
and
I'll watch it anytime it's on.
It's a fun movie, but a lot of it was based on, from what I understand, the Washington Redskins of the time. There was a strike for players, and the only team had a lot of money and kept paid their players better, and they were happy, and they didn't go on strike, were the Dallas Cowboys, of course, the in-division rival. Right. So they called the people that came in and filled in for, professional football players, professional athletes, literally people off the street. They called them scabs. And a team that I think only had a handful of real players, beat the Dallas Cowboys, which are already one of the better teams in the NFL, in an upset that doesn't get enough credit and still hasn't been portrayed in film correctly. Because here you go, in The Replacement, it's not them; it's a fictional team, and the story is completely different. But
interesting.
But ironically, though, is if you fictionalized and you made an actual version of that, it's going to be just as inaccurate as The Replacements already would have been anyway.
Right,
because you had to make it an interesting narrative, so you had to populate it with cool and fun characters. Which, I mean, that was the whole point, I think.
And I wonder, in that movie, Keanu Reeves, he replaces the star quarterback and whatever. I think he played in college, but hasn't played professionally ever. And he lives on a boat in the Chesapeake Bay. I wonder if they wrote that in, just once they secured Raven
right
Stadium.
There.
Like, you should live in a boat. We're on the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, it's actually not a bad idea. But it's kind of funny when you think about things like that. So, I was just going to mention that because you had mentioned Barry Levinson earlier, and I think that he's a good person to kind of go on because there are two, obviously in his filmography, he covers a lot of sort of Baltimore. He is a native. But I think the two kind of quintessential Baltimore movies are obviously Diner and Avalon, both with the city and kind of the culture of Maryland playing a really important part of that. So I was actually wondering, Nick, which one of those did you see first? Did you see Avalon or Diner first?
I did not see Avalon until real late in the game.
Oh, no kidding.
But Diner was definitely something that is brought up. If you haven't seen the whole movie, or if your parents wouldn't let you watch the full movie, they would show you scenes from Diner, and normally it was a parent, and normally it was a father who was a football fan who used to love the Colts before they moved to Indianapolis. And that scene in Diner where the fiance has to take the 70 question, whatever it is, 100 question quiz about the Baltimore Colts to get the credence from the father. They took that shit very, very seriously. And fathers then, many years later, that was the first thing they showed their son or their daughter to start indoctrinating them into football, even when they didn't have a professional football team to root for.
Right.
But you're right about that. You're right about that culture. And growing up in Baltimore was interesting. I was right outside the city. I was like 25 minutes outside of the city in Baltimore County. And we weren't the grizzled city that you see in Homicide, Life on the Street. And it was very suburban, but very weird. And I was a weird kid, but I always felt like I belonged. And I think it has to do with just sort of the innate weirdness of the state, the innate tribalism of the people. And that really is kind of what Barry Levinson's films are about in a lot of ways when you boil it down. It's just your tribe, and a lot of times it's family. But in Diner, it explores friendships. Mm-hmm. And Baltimore is just sort of where it takes place. And if you're from Baltimore, you pick up on a whole lot. But if you're not, it's just sort of a slice of life story about relationships. Well, and it's fitting.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because Levinson has 4 main ones that are more in his like his Maryland whatever quartet of films, and they're all different kind of ages in your life for the most part. So you've got Diner, which is these guys in their 20s, and the first of them's getting married, and you've got that reaction. Then you've got Avalon, which is going way older, with the immigrants that have come over and kind of what's going on in their world. And then Liberty Heights, which honestly was my first real introduction to the Levinson Maryland universe, his MCU, the Maryland Cinematic Universe. Liberty Heights was the first one, and my introduction to Ben Foster and Adrian Brody. That movie, for some reason, like something about it really like attached to me. And I remember I used to watch it constantly when it was on HBO. And that's kind of, you've got these younger kids that are dealing with younger kids and their parents dealing basically with integration in the city, which is really sort of fascinating to watch that. And then you've got Tin Men, which is sort of now these midlife crisis kind of the guys in between, Diner and Avalon of kind of like finding their way through it. And it's interesting that he seemed to go for each of his.
I never actually saw Tin Men.
Tin Men, I used to catch it on cable. It's Richard Dreyfuss and Danny DeVito are their tin salesmen, and they get into like a fight over a woman, and it's just they're kind of these like midlife. One of them's kind of good at the sales, one of them's just sort of a screw up. It's a sort of a more of a fluff movie, I think, than the other ones in that world. But it is interesting that
I've not seen that one either. But you had me at Danny DeVito.
It's worth a watch. I mean, I realized also going through Barry Levinson's filmography that I'm a big Barry Levinson fan. Who knew?
Oh yeah, he's very understated director, very competent. I would love to. I don't know what his last thing was, but I do have this vivid memory.
We're going to talk about it actually on this a little bit because it's another it's another Maryland set piece.
Well, great. I remember in elementary school growing up, it was an assembly, but my class had James G. Robinson, who was a producer and a key member of Morgan Creek Entertainment, Barry's production company.
No relation to Edward G. Robinson?
I don't get that reference.
Oh, where's your Moses now? It's a famous character actor that he was like this New York guy that would show up in biblical movies, but he never changed his accent. Where's your Moses now?
That reminds me of another childhood memory. When one of the only wins the Carver Center for the Arts and Technology ever had in varsity baseball was against Towson Catholic, and we had lost every game by the slaughter rule, which means if you're losing by 10 runs, 1 2 innings,
the most
they
embarrassing
call it.
Rule in sports.
And we literally lost every game of the season that way, except for Towson Catholic, and we beat them by the slaughter rule. And we were on top of our benches yelling, "Where's your Jesus now, boys?" And I didn't even know it was a reference to Edward.
There you go. There you go.
But anyway, James G. Robinson came to my elementary school. He was chairman and CEO of Morgan Creek at the time. And he came and did like a little mini speech. And I never forget, he brought Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves DVDs for every kid in the classroom.
It's a big deal.
And True Romance on DVD.
Wow.
My parents never would have let me see those movies if they weren't given to me by James G. Robinson in the middle of the class. But that was the first moment where I realized, oh, man, yeah, like people from Maryland grow up to make films. It doesn't dawn on you. Well, you live in New York City, you live in LA,
Yeah.
It's a different story. But when you saw Maryland in a show or a movie, like you stopped and took notice because it was rare. And, that was the beginning of me wanting to get into the industry or, going to film school, because I remember getting those DVDs and thinking, oh, cool. Someone from Maryland can do this.
Well, and it's kind of funny. So like we briefly talked about this movie during our Contagion podcast. I found a lot of in researching this podcast of things that we've kind of bumped up against. We're going to go into a little bit more detail here, but there's another Barry Levinson directed set in Maryland film that Ben turned me on to. And I can't remember why Ben even knew about it or whatever, but it turned out to be a really good movie called The Bay. And The Bay has a really interesting story behind how it got made.
Was it a new bay or was it an old bay?
It was a Chesapeake Bay, my friend. So here's the way this movie got made is the weirdest story I think I've heard about behind a movie. Levinson was researching a documentary talking about problems facing Chesapeake Bay due to conservation issues and ecology issues. And they couldn't get it off the ground. And so he's like, what if I couched it in like a horror, like outbreak thing, and we did it found footage documentary style, and we'd made a horror movie out of it. And they were like,
found footage horror films do have a history with Maryland.
Yes. Exactly. And so they're like, yeah, okay, go ahead and make this movie. And it's funny because I revisited it because the main actress in it is the girl that plays Lindsay in You're the Worst, Heather Donahoe, which I'm like, I must have been the first thing I saw her in. I didn't like register that it was her, but it's a pretty effective kind of horror movie and found footage. But I love that a lot of people that reviewed it, including Roger Ebert, was like, it feels like he was trying to make some kind of ecology documentary. And I was like, he was. that's kind of amazing because it has this sort of this preachy message on the other side of it with this weird thing. But that was his unofficial fifth in this Maryland.
Again, with the Maryland, another thing you're raised with is the Chesapeake Bay and just the importance of it. The cultural identity that we have with the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay reaches into other states, but Maryland claims it. It's where the blue crabs are. It's the center of our city.
Is it the Old Bay? Is Old Bay referring to Chesapeake Bay?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you have to think so.
I don't. It's something that I never thought to look up because I had always just assumed.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had things in school. I mean, we had a whole course on the unique ecosystem of the Chesapeake Bay, and it is different than other bays, of the world. And you learned about it, and you learned about the blue herons and the blue crabs, lots of blue animals in the Chesapeake Bay. But you grow up as a conservationist. I grew up watching a television show. It was Baltimore's version of Captain Kangaroo, named Captain Chesapeake, who had a puppet sea monster and would film on a boat in a green screen in the Chesapeake Bay. I always used to say I had three parents: my mother, my father, and Captain Chesapeake after school on weekdays.
Good Lord.
Look it up.
Explains so much.
Until that one day where Captain Chesapeake went too far. I'll never forget that day.
You don't like to talk about that, Ben.
So yeah, and so as we said, other than Barry Levinson, the big one coming out of Baltimore is John Waters, and that's a question. So Ben, I think you mentioned it. I assume your introduction was Serial Mom, Was that your intro to John Waters?
Serial Mom was the or Hairspray. One of those two was the first John Waters movies I saw. But for those who don't know John Waters, he basically he was one of the independent filmmakers that basically sort of pioneered a new art form of just being able to be laissez-faire. Took a lot of inspiration from some new wave films, but then basically kind of let his actors go and be as would not only conceptualize certain scenarios that were ridiculous, over the top, and then oftentimes disgusting, but would
you're really underselling his mission to gross people out.
Right. So
the king of filth.
He wanted to up the king of filth. I mean, he wanted to up the ante on the audience, is what I was about to get to the point where you couldn't dare him not to show stuff on film. But that is his importance sort of in the canon of American film. I've read 3 of John Waters' books, and he's a really cool guy, very interesting dude. His book, especially Role Models, is so fun to read. But
John Waters as a figure, I think his films are pale in comparison to his significance as a pop culture icon. And what he brought to the medium. No one's going to say, you've got to see Pink Flamingos. The scene where Divine eats that dog shit, it's filmed beautifully. It's on a clinic about how to create tension in a scene. No. It's trash.
It's avant-garde filmmaking is what it is.
He embraces it. Not even that would be giving it too much credit. Even in John Waters' own words, he was out to shock people and just wave kind of a middle finger and really kind of make waves, and that's how he was going to be known.
Yeah, he took bad taste as a badge of honor. Like that was his thing.
Well, but one of the really interesting things that I got to learn about John Waters a little bit more after going him, besides him talking about like process or creative side, is that he immersed himself sort of with what would be considered, I think, an underbelly, or what people who would be considered trash, sort of in this city that he called home. He would pride himself on spending an entire night in a dirt bar with 7 people, who are like the lowest common denominator of person, that you would think.
He was an avid hitchhiker. Where kind of Bill Murray has the stories of just dropping in on someone's dinner, eating a fry, and telling them no one will believe you. His version of that is literally hitchhiking across the U.S. There have been stories that have emerged from people who just picked up somebody that turned out to be John Waters, but a lot of the times they didn't even know who he was. It was just a weirdo with a pencil-thin mustache who was hitchhiking on the side of the road.
Which is creepy.
The fact that he ever got picked up is kind of amazing. But,
but you know why? You know why I think he did get picked up. Honestly, he's got an aura of openness and kindness, and it's sort of like he accepts everybody for who they are, and he sees the beauty in everybody, and that's why he's not just a gay rights activist. He's a trans activist. He spoke up to the people who never got. I mean, think about Divine. Divine now would have a home with the success of RuPaul's Drag Race, but back then it was absurd.
Right.
No, that she would be getting the type of attention that she got, and she did, and it was because it was non-apologetic acceptance of everything.
Sure.
And I loved that message as a kid. Well, I didn't know his movies. I didn't know John. I wasn't a John Waters fan, but I was a fan of John Waters.
Right. But before we get into the movies, I do think it was interesting, and like I said, I think he mentions it in a couple of books. Like I said, he's populated sort of these characters in his head based off of amalgamations of people that he's met during these things. But he says
you got a lot of trash in Baltimore, a lot of low class, beautiful people.
Still to this day, John Waters goes out on Friday nights. One night a week, he goes out and he says yes to everything. He goes to some trashy bar, and if somebody says, "Do you want to go do this other thing, or do you want to come to a house party?" he'll go. And he meets people, and it's these experiences that basically dictated his creative process through his career. I mean, as you can kind of tell as his filmography becomes a little bit more varied, still embracing some of the gross and crazy and over the top aspects, But then you get to later into the 90s, and you can argue that a lot of John Waters' films are quality movies. I mean, it's not at that point, it's not just a gross out tactic anymore.
Yeah.
And like I said,
I like, and I gotta say, if I had to pick one John Waters film, Serial Mom is a real good starter for someone who hasn't ever seen John Waters and doesn't want to start off, hitting the ground running with Pink Flamingos. But I gotta say, the dark horse, my favorite John Waters film is Pecker.
Yeah, I agree with
you. Movie.
A lot of people think he got sold out for that, and it is more commercially friendly in a lot of ways. But it is, I think, from start to finish, his funniest. It just works, and it might have bent the knee to more acceptable social conventions, but
because that movie is so clearly his. It's his journey. It's his story. It's this kid that takes pictures of garbage and weird things in their world and becomes famous for it, and people start calling it art, and then he begins to resent the fact that they're calling that art, and he brings it all. It's a perfect.
It's pretty great.
It is a perfect way to take his story and throw it out there like that, and I think the one similarity that's kind of interesting, kind of hearing you guys talk about it, but they do it in completely different ways, and I think Waters has used it much more as an advocate, although the other does as well, is Howard Stern was known for a similar thing in the 90s where he would bring on, he was bringing on strippers and porn stars and all these things, but he was giving them a platform. Like he was interviewing them the same way that he would interview anybody else on the show. Yes, and there was plenty of salacious.
He played up who they were. Yes.
There was definitely the salacious side, but there are a lot of times you would also just be sitting there talking like, what was your how did you get here? Like, what is your story? What is this stuff? Well, they'd never really gone through that. I think Waters obviously does it to a completely different level and with a little bit more, obviously more care, just in general because he's really
maybe not
hanging out with them. Well,
you're right though.
I think there's more of I think he has a more social aspect with those people outside of his films versus Stern's just like what's on there is on air.
Sure.
But I think that you get some interesting
really
things.
Good,
I think you get some really interesting things out of people when you treat them that way. And I think that's what's so fun with a lot of Waters stuff, even when he's doing the gross out and the crazy shit and all that stuff, is watching these people kind of populate his universe and get their 15 minutes and get up there on screen and kind of be shown. It's interesting.
You come for the absurdity, and then you realize, oh, these characters are insane, and I'm intrigued. And the thing about John Waters also started this thing where, man, if I ever directed a film, I would have some reference to Baltimore. He loved. Everything was a love letter to Baltimore specifically, which when we talk about other films that will qualify for this podcast, they don't, it's not a love letter to Baltimore in the way that John Waters made sure that every single one of his films included. In Serial Mom, she crashes a music venue called Hammer Jacks, which was an institution. It's a parking lot
nice.
now.
Yeah.
In Cecil B. Demented, they shot in the Senator Theater where I worked. And met Edward Norton and Salma Hayek when they premiered the score, because Edward Norton would always premiere his Maryland premieres at the Senator Theater. These landmarks and the things that he loved growing up, he made sure. Video Americana in Serial Mom, he made sure that they all got a cameo.
I was going to say one thing I thought was really interesting is that the original Hairspray, which I think is like 1982, is actually a pretty relatively 88. Okay. Yeah, it was early on. I remember that. So, but that was not the musical rendition a lot of people, it wasn't the stage musical, which was then adapted into a film.
There's far more John Waters in the original film.
There's far more John Waters in the original film, but Baltimore specifically plays such an important role in the original Hairspray. They would have to be incredibly emboldened to move that to any other place. So right at the very beginning,
good morning
of the song, good morning. It's giving you this Baltimore experience, and even to the point where in the actual remake of the movie, John Waters has a cameo in the third shot of the movie where he's flashing the main character.
Yeah.
And it's great.
And I think also I will give rare props to John Travolta for being the only Edna to really dig into that Maryland accent, which is I think one of the harder accents to do. And it's not done enough in these Maryland movies that we are discussing right now.
Well, it of course it's a very specific section of white people. You know, there's a whole accent for black people in the city that is as distinctive, but totally different. You may have seen it go viral in the famous Arn.
Yeah.
Aaron earned an iron urn. Sounds the same. But yeah, I really. The funny thing is, you know, there's a lot of things not to respect about John Travolta, but as a Marylander, man, do we love it when people sink their teeth into that long "ew."
And he goes hard, and it's because he's in a musical, and it's so broad anyway, and it actually it totally works. It's really fun to watch.
I appreciated that from him.
Wasn't as good as Zac Efron.
Right. Can I tell my John Waters story? Waters story.
Please,
let's hear it.
Yes.
And I feel like everybody has a John Waters story if you were born and raised in Baltimore, which is another part of his legacy. My mother was a teacher, and another one of her teacher friends actually babysat a baby John Waters for many years. And when she found out that I was interested in going to film school, she looked him up and she called him and said, "Hey, you know, one of my past students, he's going to film school. You know, do you have a couple minutes to call him?" And he said yes. So one day I got home from school and there was a message blinking on the answering machine. Remember those? And I pressed play, and it was John Waters saying, "Hi, Nick. If you just give me a call at this number, I'm here for the next couple of days." He was in San Francisco at the time. And he goes, "No, we'll chat. I hear you're going to film school." Click. And we sat there. We were in awe. Totally just shocked. So I called him right away. I didn't really know what to expect. I called him up in San Francisco. It was much later in the day. Or sorry, it was earlier in the day. And I could already hear classical music playing in the background. I swear, it felt like a setup. I heard piano and violin, classy as fuck. And John Waters answers the phone, and he goes, "Oh, Nick, right, I've been waiting for your call." And we talked for about 15 minutes. And it wasn't about film school. It wasn't really about film. It was just about, like, are you excited? Like, you know, do you know when you leave? And, you know, it was more just we didn't really get into film. He just wanted to talk to me, and he was very, very nice. And I hung up like very, very excited.
That's awesome.
And I'll never, ever forget that. He has a P.O. box at Atomic Books, which is a bar and comic book store in Hamden, which, if you're talking about the part of Baltimore that is John Waters' people, it is Hamden. It is big hair and hipsters and weirdos. And
Hamden is where A Dirty Shame takes place.
I believe so. Yeah. And it's right near the video store that he would film in, and it's a really silly bookstore because you walk past the comic book section, and there's like a speakeasy, and they only serve mead in the back, probably
of course
because of some obscure liquor license thing,
or just he wants mead served there.
right. Well, anyway, anybody can leave a letter or leave something for John Waters at his P.O. box because it's such a hub of downtown Hamden. Everybody goes. It's sort of like if you are a tourist in Baltimore, it's all those stupid top 10, like, make sure you check it out, spots. I mean, it is pretty awesome. But he's accessible, and he loves the people, and he loves the state, and he splits his time between California and Maryland, but the love that he has for the hometown is pretty awesome as a Marylander and as a film fan. And I just appreciate the hell out of that.
Yeah, and I think you're right I think Serial Mom and Pecker are great introductions into kind of the world, especially Serial Mom.
Crybaby also. It gave Johnny Depp kind of his start, almost.
Yeah,
Almost.
Crybaby's pretty good.
I remember I saw Crybaby. I think I saw Crybaby before Serial Mom, and then I didn't know they were directed by the same person. But I liked Serial Mom. Serial Mom was one of those movies that like things started happening in the movie, and I assumed they were dream sequences. Like there were things that happened. And I'm like, well, this can't be. I'm like, this can't be where the plot is going, right?
She's not actually killing.
Yeah, she's not actually killing people, right? And like, it was a very bizarre movie because I remember my mom and I rented it.
Well, it was anchored by a pretty phenomenal performance by Kathleen Turner. So I mean,
and Sam Waterston, man.
That's what I will say is that more so than any other, unless you take Pink Flamingos into effect as well. More than any other of his movies, it's anchored by like a truly like pretty gnarly powerhouse performance, and the families, they're all great, and the thing is, the cast is usually all good or great, in John Waters movies, but that was obviously like he was working with somebody that was a pro, and really leaned in.
And I want to get to just a couple more movies before we run out of time here, but
I'm just indebted to John Waters for making weird.
Yeah, man.
Cool.
Well, I was kind of, I don't know if this is too personal to ask, Nick, but you worked on the Ricky Lake show. Did you ever talk to her?
That
like
is too fucking personal.
About, talk about John Waters ever in passing or no?
She was not very accessible.
Okay. All right. That's, I
would have loved to, and maybe it would have humanized her for me a little bit, but she was not very accessible during that experience. But yeah, she definitely got her start. With Hairspray, as Tracy Turnbull, Tracy Turnbull.
I mean, she was involved. She was heavily involved in several of his movies. But, So I think the other really huge movie we definitely have to talk about that takes place in Maryland is the Blair Witch Project. When we've talked about that on,
which takes place in downtown Baltimore.
That would be an amazing reboot.
Completely different movie.
Well, swap Baltimore for Burkittsville, and you're in the right area.
I'm going to bring Omar from The Wire into it as the Blair Witch, and it is going to be chilling.
Blair Witch coming.
But before we talk about Blair Witch or any horror things, you know what movie I did not realize was actually filmed and took place in Maryland? It's Explorers, Joe Dante's Explorers.
I did not know that. How did I not even see that in my research?
Yeah, it takes place right around Annapolis.
I legit 3 days ago recommended that movie to Jeremiah Erickson.
Oh, no kidding.
To watch.
I feel like I recommended that to him a while
You
ago,
might,
too.
yeah. I think like he's been looking for. I recommend that in Willow because he said he was looking for Lord of the Rings movies. I go, do you want to see the best Lord of the Rings movies? That's not a Lord of the Rings movie.
Because George
Willow.
Lucas couldn't get
the rights.
Couldn't get the rights.
When I told him the story, I realized, by the way, telling someone that doesn't know any of that for the first time, he was like, "What?" I go, "Yeah, George Lucas decided to make a Lord of the Rings on his own with little people because he couldn't get the rights to Lord of the Rings." And he was like, "I have to see this right now."
Nice.
One I didn't know
takes place in Baltimore.
Well, the other one I didn't know that takes place in Baltimore, I didn't remember, is The Shape of Water. Not that it's necessarily like I know, it just didn't register for me that story is taking place there.
I saw that film in Baltimore with my mom because it opened in the Christmas season, and I was home. And Michael Shannon's character is not from Baltimore, where the action takes place, but he moves there in order to steal this sea creature or whatever. And there's a scene where he basically just goes off, fuck Baltimore, this shitty city. The whole crowd booed the scream at him. And I was like, some things never change. The whole crowd just got up and got ruckus. So when he's defeated, like the crowd was nuts, like it was Star Wars. Nobody hits my brother but me.
That's awesome.
How to villainize someone in Maryland.
Well, if I ever have to
all he had to do was say "fuck Cal Ripken." Immediately.
My favorite disparaging Baltimore remark is in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, where he's like, "What you mean if like someone dies here, then somebody gets saved in Baltimore? It's a beautiful day in Baltimore." And he was just like, yeah, I've been to Baltimore. You win." It was just what Val Kilmer's line is. And that always made me laugh too.
Well,
I'm glad it made you laugh.
But the one really interesting one, this is the last one I had on mine that had any real connection there, was Shattered Glass, another movie we discussed on our Rosario Dawson podcast. Yeah. But there's probably the best scene in the movie is it's as this guy that's been writing this fake story is getting deeper and deeper into his lies. He eventually agrees to take his editor to the location where he claims he heard this story and had these sources. And it is in Bethesda, Maryland. And apparently, reading up on it, was a big deal for people that knew that area. They were like, oh yeah, this is this showdown is happening in this very specific place here.
By the way, there is a connection with directors in Bethesda, Maryland. Matt, are you aware of this?
I am not.
Spike Jonze was raised in Bethesda, Maryland.
We'll be talking about him in about 10 minutes.
Right. David Ayer was born in Bethesda, Maryland.
Oh, interesting.
As a matter of fact. Bethesda, which is
crazy.
Which is funny to me. Jim Henson was raised in Maryland also. And Ryan Johnson of Silver Spring.
Ryan Johnson of AC/DC?
Ryan Johnson of that movie that we're not going to talk about in the Star Wars franchise.
Oh, Rian Johnson. Yes.
It's Ryan Johnson. Ryan is how you pronounce it.
Oh, I don't know.
Ryan. Yeah. Well, he has
it's just spelled weird.
He shares a birthday with one Benjamin Scott Wilson.
Right. I did know that.
Wow.
But Ryan Johnson moved to Los Angeles.
Rian, please.
That's Ryan. But he moved to Los Angeles at a pretty young age, though.
When you can't see it sounds wrong.
We'll claim whoever we need to claim.
I was like, Brian Johnson of AC/DC is not from Baltimore. I'm from Maryland. I know this for a fact.
Can you imagine an Australian Baltimore accent?
Yes, Hollywood film director Ryan Johnson has the biggest balls of them all.
And on that note, we will close out our on location.
Let's talk about Blair Witch.
Okay, we got 2 minutes.
I want to touch on Blair Witch, and then I even gave you a sound file.
Oh, you did give me a sound file. That's correct.
Not so fast, buddy. Now, Blair Witch is another movie that, man, it dethroned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as the highest-grossing independent film of its time. It was basically the inventor of viral marketing.
And found
we
footage.
were all led to believe that this was real found footage. It was a brilliant, brand new concept. And the fact that it took place in Burkittsville in Frederick County, no one in Maryland knew of Burkittsville when it came out. But the fact that a film like that was just a pop culture phenomenon that took the world by storm, was simply placed anywhere in Maryland, was a big deal for me as a high schooler. I had that Blair Witch poster in my room, and someone in Seattle, Washington had that Blair Witch poster in their room, and it took place in Maryland. It was a big deal.
No, and what it was funny is I distinctly remember the name, and remember Burkittsville, Maryland, right? That I remember that in combination. But no matter how many times I probably heard that, I always envisioned that movie in Seattle. I'm not gonna lie, that movie never to me in my brain took place anywhere remotely on the East Coast. It was completely in the Pacific Northwest.
No, it's an interesting town. I've only been there once. It is really kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Those people only went there once. They never returned.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't need to get into that. But we had this legend. And I'm not sure if it was in Burkittsville or not. It would make sense that it would be. But we had this urban legend that was the equivalent of Bloody Mary, and it was called Black Agnes. And there was a cemetery where in the center of the cemetery, there was
You've told me about this.
Yeah, there's a grave, and it was a statue of a veiled woman in a seated position.
Nick, it was a burger joint. It was Black Angus.
Oh, I thought for sure it was. All right, never mind. Let's move forward.
I'm just joking.
No. Anyway, people would dare other kids to hop the fence into the cemetery, and you'd run to the center, and it was precariously placed in the center of the cemetery, right? So if you sat on Black Agnes's lap for a minute, you could then leave. And so kids would like jump the fence and they had vandalism problems. They had to move it. They had to move the statue, take it out of the cemetery because so many kids were taking the dare and sitting on Black Agnes's lap.
Sounds. I have a lot of problems with the whole Black Agnes thing.
Whoa, Black Agnes, bam-a-lam. Whoa, Black Agnes, bam-a-lam.
Maybe we should write a movie about the legend of Black Angus.
Is that the sequel to 1990s Angus?
Black God. All right, Nick, we got to get this clip going, and we got to get out of this. We got to get out. We're going to get taken off the air.
So lastly, this is kind of off the beaten path Maryland recommendation, but under the right circumstances, this is a fun watch, and I implore you to look for Heavy Metal Parking Lot, a amateur documentary that took place in a parking lot in Landover, Maryland, right before a Judas Priest concert. It's hilarious, and rumor is that it was a huge favorite on the Nirvana tour bus. Apparently, they loved it.
Interesting.
But you're gonna hear a great Baltimore accent at the end of this clip from a woman from Glen Burnie, who's also the name of a character that I really want to put in a film at some point, but also a geographical location in the state of Maryland. But this is Heavy Metal Parking Lot, which is just interviewing a bunch of drunk metalheads in Landover, Maryland.
To the dawn, loving till the morning. I'm gone. Yeah, I know. Hey, let me tell you something. Where are you from? Priest is the best, man. Priest is the best. I'm telling you. Hey, let me tell you. Robert Halford is the best motherfucking single around. Hey, can't get down there, man. You can play some guitar.
What's your name?
Graham, man. Like Graham and Dent.
Where are you from? Where are you from?
Well, I'm from the West Coast, man.
You came all the way here to see the band? Or you're just passing
here
through?
now. But, that's a different thing.
He means like, where are you right now?
Besides Earth. He's an acid man right now.
I'm on acid. That's where I am.
Is that all right?
Where are you from?
Glen Burnie.
Yeah, you like heavy metal?
Hell yeah.
What do you
Hell
do
yeah.
when you go to a heavy metal concert?
Party.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You go to school?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Do they like heavy metal in Glen Burnie?
Yeah. That's it.
What would you say? What would you say if you saw Rob Halford right now?
I'd jump his bones.
Hey, is Ozzy really raunchy in concert?
Yeah. So
I'd jump his bones.
I'd jump his bones.
I think it just needed. You should have just stopped recording the podcast right after she said that. Jump his bones.
Get
and
that
then just
drop.
go straight back.
I'll get that drop.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the New Wave podcast and our shorter special edition on Maryland. And we'll be back with a new episode next week. So cheers.
Cheers.
Hopefully this COVID's over so we can go down the ocean and jump in the water, hon.
COVID.
COVID-19.
Been waiting for
COVID-19, you better watch out for that virus, hon. You better watch out. That COVID's gonna get you. It's a respiratory illness.
COVID's over.
Hey, if you catch that
It's
COVID,
over.
it's all over, hon. It's all over.